DOS gaming from the 80s and 90s really helped develop the gaming genres we take for granted today. Many of the classics were created during this period, and you can play them all today thanks to a great emulation package called DOSBox. So, let me take you through a full installation, game download and setup to get you started. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. DOS gaming is a fantastic area for you to explore. There literally are thousands of fantastic games, including many of the classics such as Lemmings, Doom and so on. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you'll have seen me having a couple of goes over the last few months at generating an actual native DOS gaming machine using some old hardware. And that met with reasonable success, but it wasn't perfect. The last one we did, and I'll put links to all these down in the description below. We were able to use a brand new Sound Blaster emulator piece of code to bring some sound into it, where we had silence before that. But even that wasn't perfect, and you are going to spend a lot of time tinkering and messing with drivers and so on, which in itself can be a really fun pastime. But if you really just want to get hold of the games and play them in as easily a way as possible, then my recommendation is to use an emulator package called DOSBox. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this tutorial. So I'm going to show you a complete installation of how to download, install and then set up DOSBox. And then we're going to have a look at some of the issues that you might come across when you try to install some of the games, especially when they need sort of floppy drives and CD-ROM drives, and perhaps there is some sort of security software which might stop you running and playing those games. So let's get straight in and start looking at getting DOSBox running. So installing DOSBox is very straightforward. You first need to go to DOSBox.com, which is the actual website for this package, and you'll find there's a link then to the latest version. So over there, we then just simply need to download that file. And I've created a folder on one of my hard drives called DOSBox, and I'm just going to really keep everything together in this folder. So both the installation files and then the files for my games and so on. So I'm going to save the installer there. Once that's downloaded, I'm then going to open that folder up, and I'm going to run the installation program. So I'm going to go through there, I'm going to install all of that. I'm then going to change my destination folder to this folder that I just created. So that's on my drive E, and it's in DOSBox. And I'm then just going to install the software. Okay, so you can see now we have, inside my DOSBox folder, I have the actual software itself sitting in there. So we need to do a little bit of setup now before we actually run DOSBox. So DOSBox itself will need to connect to a folder on your hard drive and use that then as its main C drive in the emulated PC. So I'm going to create a folder then inside my DOSBox folder, again keeping everything together here. I'm going to call it C. It doesn't actually matter what you name the folder on your actual computer. Whenever we connect to that from DOSBox, it will be drive C. But I'm just going to call it C so I know which one's which. We then need to do some configuration to DOSBox. So I'm going to go into the DOSBox executable. So when I installed it, it created the installation files here. So the actual code is in here. We'll see the application itself sitting there. It will by default create a desktop icon for you, so you don't have to come in here to actually run that. But we do need to come in here to run this options.batch file. So if I open that up, that will open up Notepad with the configuration file for DOSBox, and this is where we can set up how it runs on our computer. So you can see there are lots of instructions in here as to what all the values mean. But let's run through some of the main ones now just to get it set up. So by default, when DOSBox starts, it will start in a little window. But we, of course, want to have this running as a full DOS gaming machine on our computer. So I'm going to tell it that I want it to run in full screen when it starts up. Now, with it running in full screen, we do need to have a bit of a play with our full resolution and our output surface settings. So the full resolution then is the screen resolution it's going to use when it goes into full screen mode. Now, if you leave everything as it is, it will try to just read things from your computer and set itself up there, but it doesn't always get it right. So I find the easiest way here to do is to actually tell it the screen resolution of the monitor it's running on. So I'm using a full HD monitor here. So I'm going to set it to 1920 by 1080. If we go up the top here, you will see that there are some other options in here. So we have original desktop, and then we have giving it the actual dimensions of itself. Okay. Now teamed with this then, we do need to set a few other things. So we have this thing called output, and that tells it in effect what technology to use to render the screen. So you can see here that it's direct draw and OpenGL. So for my screen, I'm going to say here my output then, I want to use OpenGL. Now, sometimes you will have to play around with that to get the best thing working on your computer, but generally OpenGL for any sort of reasonably modern graphics card will work. So we now have it will start in full screen. It will use our monitor's native resolution. We'll use OpenGL to render that, and then we also then want to, down here somewhere, we want to set the aspect. So what this is saying here is in our DOS computer, most of those ran then at a 4:3 aspect ratio as opposed to the widescreen in here. So I'm going to set that to true so that we maintain the aspect ratio of our DOS computer. So leave that in there. Okay, so you can see there are lots of other options in here as regards how our computer is, our emulated computer is set up. We can see here we've got some details for the Sound Blaster card that it's going to emulate. So it's going to emulate a Sound Blaster 16, which is one of the later models, but that should all be fine. But again, if you find that your sound's not going quite right, you can come in here and play around with these settings here. Generally, I wouldn't play around with the IRQ and DMA settings, but maybe change the model. And you can see up here that we have a range of models that you can use. But going down here even further, you can see there's a whole lot of other bits and pieces that we can set up. But eventually we want to get down to the very bottom of this listing, and we find there is an auto-exec section. So if you're at all familiar with DOS, you'll know that there is an autoexec.bat file which runs once the computer starts up, and that lets you execute certain commands as soon as the computer lets you execute them automatically as soon as the computer starts. So this is where we need to do some setting up for the way in which DOSBox is going to run on our computer. So I said already there that it wants to connect to a folder and use that then as its main drive C. And to do that, we need to mount a drive. So we're going to mount drive C. So that will be drive C in DOSBox. And then we've already created the folder. So it's on drive E on my computer. It's in the DOSBox folder, and it's folder C. So that will say mount a new hard drive, or mount a new drive. We can mount other drives as well. Call it drive C, and that's the folder it relates to on my computer. We can also then, if you have actual floppy drives and CD drives connected to your actual PC, we can then connect those to DOSBox as well. So we could say we could mount a floppy drive, so floppy drive A. We could mount that at our drive A. So if your actual real floppy drive was drive A, we could do that. We then have to say -T and call it a floppy drive. We could also mount drive D in DOSBox and connect that to drive D on your computer, and again mount that then as a CD-ROM. And that would then let DOSBox be able to use your floppy drive and your CD drive. Now I don't have those on my computer, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Last thing then is when DOSBox boots up, it does boot up onto its own internal drive Z, which we don't really want to. So once it's finished mounting drive C, what we want to do is to get it to actually change onto that so that we're set up ready to go with our DOS software. So I'm just going to put that last command then, which tells it to make drive C our local working directory. So let's save that, and that should now be DOSBox ready to run. So we simply need to execute the application file, and that should boot up into DOSBox. So that boots up, and there we drop into our DOSBox. And of course this is in full screen mode. So the first key we need to get the hang of is the Alt-Enter combination. So pressing that will take DOSBox into and out of full screen mode. Now while in full screen mode, DOSBox does take control of your keyboard and mouse, so if you want to do anything with your computer you will need to go back out into windowed mode. But we're now here sitting on drive C, and as you can see, if we do a dir command, that will list the contents of this folder, which of course at the moment are empty. So we need to go off now and get some games. Getting hold of DOS games isn't so hard. It's sometimes referred to as abandonware. Now, as usual, do make sure that you either have the original software or you have permission to download the games before you do so. Obviously, there are various copyright rules involved there. But just for speed, I'm just going to download some software here. And again, I've hidden the address bar, so you won't be able to sort of see where I'm getting this from. But in this particular place, if I go to the abandonware DOS games, again, let's go and get Doom, which is sort of the one that everybody does use when they're doing sort of DOSBox and so on. So we come down here and find Doom. Doom, let's go across into that one. And again, we can scroll down and we can eventually get to the download link. Okay, and yeah, we have a workaround script here. I did make a video a while back on how to use TamperMonkey, and again I'll put a link to that in the description down below. And obviously I will be removing that link and that script as soon as I've just gone through this video and downloaded this. So we're just simply we're going to just save that link as with this one. I'm then going to save it into my drive. So this is looking at my DOSBox area. Well, let me just pull that down so you can see it. So in my drive C, I'm going to create a new folder in here where I'm going to create my downloads. Now, one of the things you've got to remember in using DOS is that DOS has this 8.3 file name specification. So we have 8 letters in the file name, the dot, and then a 3-letter extension. So directory names do need to be 8 letters. It will accept them longer than that, but it does cause a few problems when you come to try and use the directory names, because it does truncate them. So I would advise whenever you are saving things and creating directories, you do stick to up to 8 letters in your file and directory names. So I'm going to create that download folder there. And I'm then going to download my zip file, and I'm just going to call it Doom, because again I want to keep it into that 8-letter limit. So in this one here I have to keep that, and that will download the Zoom files for me. So once that's down, if I go into that folder, and let me just pull this up here for you so you can see it. Okay, so we've got our zip file there, and again I simply want to then extract that, so I'm going to extract it to Doom, And once that trundles through, and then I can get rid of the actual zip file. So basically, remember this folder C in effect is the C drive in our DOSBox. So I now have a folder called download, and inside that a folder called Doom, and inside that we have the actual game files, including the install file in there. So all we've got to do now to get this game up and running is to jump onto DOSBox and run this install.bat file. So in DOSBox, we're already on drive C. So I want to CD into my download folder and then CD into Doom. If I do my directory, I can see the files in there, and I just want to run the install.bat file. This is now going through the installation in Doom. So again, which drive do you want to install it onto? Of course, we're going to go for drive C. We will use the /doom folder, just as it says. It's asking me to recreate it. So we're installing the software at the moment. It's now setting everything up for me. And hopefully in a while, once that's gone through, it will drop us into Doom. There we go. So we finally now have to set up the various aspects in Doom. So again, DOSBox is very good at getting hold of our mouse and so on. So we can use keyboard and mouse for this. We are using a Sound Blaster card on port 220, a Sound Blaster card for the sound effects on 220. It's IRQ7 and DMA1, and then just number of channels 3. So Doom does pick up on the settings that DOSBox is using. So we can just save that, and that should be us ready to go. So there we go. Doom is up and running. Again, full sound and everything, and we are ready to play. So if I press escape, we should be able to start a new game. And we're into Doom. So off we go, and we should be able to, if we come round here, and that gets us everything up and running then, and Doom is working as a DOS game. So Doom is one of the particularly easy games to install, and there are quite a few which are as easy or even easier. So I'm in a directory now where I have downloaded the files for Prince of Arabia, and that's just a straight download and loading it then and saving it then into one of my folders in my download area. And this particular game does not involve any actual installation at all. We just run the Prince executable file and we're straight into our game. So again, very, very easy to install, and we're up and running straight away. Now, that of course is not what's going to happen for every single game, particularly games that require the CD-ROM to be installed, or that maybe have some sort of copy protection or something like that. So let's have a look and see if we can see any of those games and how to get around some of these obstacles. So for example, Command and Conquer is a great game which I really do advise you have a play with. But that does require the CD-ROMs to be actually installed into the PC. The actual game itself, when it starts up, will check to see that there is actually a CD-ROM there before it lets you actually play the game. So there's a couple of ways around this. I'm sitting now on my main PC and looking at the files in my DOSBox area. And what I've done here is, one of the options is that we can actually download a copy of the CD ISO file. So this ISO file is in effect an image of the CD-ROM, and we can actually attach that then into DOSBox as the CD. So if I come back into DOSBox and go into my configuration file, remember the options area here? Oh, he says trying to click on it. Okay, so if I go down to the bottom here, what I can start to do is I can start to build up an area where I have various workarounds for particular games. Remember, we can, in these autoexec.bat lines, we can actually use the hash line here to comment out. So I'm creating a little area here for my Command and Conquer. And you can see on this line here, we are creating, we're mounting that ISO CD image as drive D. So I'm doing image mount, it's going to become drive D on my DOSBox, and then linking to the actual ISO file, and I'm then telling DOSBox that the type of this file then is an ISO, and that will in effect emulate me plugging my CD drive into my DOSBox installation. Now underneath this you can see that there is another way of doing it. So if I come back to the actual file manager here, inside DOSBox, I'm creating another folder in my DOSBox area for CDs. And I'm created there one for Command and Conquer, and that just simply is a collection of all the files that are on that CD. So if I come back then to my configuration file, what I'm doing here is, again, I could swap these around if I want to. Again, depending on which one I do, I only have to do one of these. I could mount drive D as that folder, telling DOSBox that this is a CD-ROM. But one of the things that Command and Conquer does, it checks to see the disk label, and that's how it works out whether you've actually got a valid disk in there or not. So for this one here, we do have to tell DOSBox that when you connect this folder up as a CD-ROM, you need to label the CD-ROM as GDI, which is the label then that the real CD has. Command and Conquer came with two CDs, one so you could play as the, in effect, NATO troops, and then I think the other one was labelled as NOD, and that let you play in effect as the Soviet pact groups. So again, that just simply in effect lets DOSBox emulate correctly that CD being mounted. So let's see if that works then. So we've now got drive D mounted, so if we go on there and list the files, we can see the install script, and we can run that then to install Command and Conquer. And this particular program then goes into quite a lengthy installation process. So at the moment it's going to be looking at our sound card, so we can try and let it auto detect our sound card. And there we can see that it's come up with the Sound Blaster 16. So we can then go and test that.
Center.
And we can see that everything's working okay. So we can accept that settings. And now we're into the main installation process for this game.
Sound hardware initialized.
Now, as I said, this one is a particularly lengthy installation process. Basically, we tell it which folder we want to save our game into, and then off it goes and installs that. So I'm going to jump ahead to the end of the installation, and then we'll see that it will then jump into the game itself.
Installation complete.
It's at this point then that the software checks to see if the correct DVD drive or CD drive is in the computer, and if it wasn't in, we would not get it going into then these cutscenes. So we now have a number of cutscenes in this particular game. So again, you can enjoy the good old VGA style video work. This was pretty good quality when it came out in the 1990s, but obviously is showing a bit of age now. But anyway, I'm going to jump ahead again, just whip through these. There is quite a lengthy sequence which introduces the whole idea of what this game is about. But let's jump through to the actual gameplay, and we can see how that works.
Profitability by 49%.
So again, after some explanation from the kernel as to what we need to do, we have our final cutscene, and then we should jump into the actual game itself. And here we go. So again, Command and Conquer is where you need to control various army units to defeat your enemy. So again, we're selecting some army units there, and they're going off then to attack those two turrets which are firing at my ship. So that is Command and Conquer, and as you can see, we've gone through the whole process then of attaching a CD drive, fooling the computer into thinking that's part of our system, and we now have a fully working game.
Reinforcements have arrived.
So you might wonder, for each of these particular games, how do you actually know what to do to get it to work? Well, this is where there is a very handy DOSBox wiki website. And again, searching, there are other articles, of course, on the web which tell you how to do this. But the actual DOSBox wiki site does have quite a lot of information in there. And as you can see for Command & Conquer here, it's basically telling you what you need to do. So that will open you up to the vast array of DOS games, and there are some truly fantastic classic games out there. Again, we've got Lemmings on the screen at the moment, but there really are so many to choose from that great era of DOS gaming. Now don't forget as well that DOSBox, it not just creates a gaming PC, but it actually just creates a general purpose DOS machine. So anything you could do in DOS, you can do in DOSBox. And that includes having a look at some of the old application software. So we've got WordStar, an old word processor from 1986 on screen at the moment. And if anything, it will make you appreciate just how good the word processors are these days, where you can just simply use your mouse to highlight things and change fonts and so on. Of course, that was quite a lot different back in the day. Now, hopefully then you've enjoyed this and are looking forward to doing some DOS gaming. If so, please do hit the like button to let YouTube know that I'm creating something useful here, and do subscribe to the channel to make sure that you get notified of updates and new videos coming out. I look forward to seeing you again very soon in some other videos, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects, and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and visit my website.